Be real about who you are and how you want to get there. The stuff they don't teach you in film school is the politics and the business. But unless you have something to give them to sell you, my name's Luc Montpellier. I've been a cinematographer for about over 25 years, and I'm happy to be here to talk about it all. How I started my career is an interesting journey. It was a very different time than today. It was the era of film and video, where those were the two main formats. So I guess I'm from an era where motion picture film was still very highly used. And the reason why I talk about that initially is that it feels like a very different time than now, where the job of a cinematographer was very different in a lot of ways based on the kind of highly specialized thing. So I started very early on, like my friend Jeremy Benning that's here, that we basically started in music videos, or I started in music videos after going to film school at TMU. That's what brought me here from Northern Ontario, and then did my 4 years there. And then it was the era of music videos then, like pre-YouTube, pre-everything. So, stations like Much Music and MTV were very much the way you would experience bands' music videos. So in the mid-90s, when I was in film school, that was very prevalent production for that. So I cut my teeth in music videos, and it was quite an amazingly creative time. And again, we were all shooting on film, so the level of specialty and the level of skill or chance taking you were taking with that form was really exciting, because you were the only one that knew what it was going to look like the next day, as opposed to everyone looking at a monitor like today and knowing what was happening. So that's where I kind of started. It's in music videos, and then the odd short film would come along because at the time we had a lot of funding for production and for film with Telefilm and the Arts Council. So it was a really interesting time. I always had my sight on narrative filmmaking. Even though I was doing videos, I was always kind of injecting that style in that process. And then, one thing leads to the next, and then the first independent feature came, and that kind of started me slowly into, a track in the narrative world. It's interesting. I've been a member of the CSC for a very, very long time, just as a full member. And it's been interesting seeing the organization evolve, or try to figure out how to evolve as the business changes. And this last year, I basically decided, I guess, that I was hoping to give back to the society that I really enjoyed being part of, and being, part of a society where it's one of the few places that you can actually talk to other cinematographers and, share stories. So I decided with that to run for the board of directors, and luckily was accepted. And I've been actively working with an amazing group of people that are really trying to create a legacy for the future and modernize in a lot of ways the CSC. So it's an amazing amount of work, but it's also been very satisfying to see a bunch of people really care about the society. So that also, I've always been mentoring people aside from that on my own. People would approach me and say, hey, can I shadow you? Can I talk to you? Go out for coffee? So I was always doing that. But the CSC has this mentorship program where I was like, well, there's an official program where there are people actually applying. Why don't I formalize it? So I basically have taken advantage of, offering my services as a mentor. And I have 3 different mentees this year, and they're all from different backgrounds, and I learn as much from them as they learn from me, because it reminds me of where I started and what it's very satisfying to be able to pass on or to help kind of navigate questions they might have. And some of them are not easily answered, but at least I can offer some thoughts on what I've experienced. I get a lot of questions about how do I level up from young DPs that have been shooting videos, corporate, like everyone is on a journey, I find. But the hard thing with that is, and not necessarily hard thing, but the answer to that, I always say this is a long game. I think it's about patience. So there's not one answer because everyone is very different in their approaches, their interests. Some people want to shoot commercials, so they keep trying to level up in the commercial world. Some people want to do narrative. Some people want to do documentary or feature documentary. So that question is not turnkey for everyone. Or the answer to that question of how do I level up is not turnkey to everyone. And that's what I say to them. I mean, the word, time is essentially the core kind of driver of that, where there's an element of luck also to this. But what you can do, and what I say to young DPs, is try to set yourself up or put yourself in a position where things possibly could happen. And that is also a very difficult thing. The age-old answer of, just keep shooting, I always say is a little bit, it's not useful, because how does one keep shooting when that's the issue they have? So really, it's about attitude. I think if you, as a young DP, understand that it's a long game, it took me 10 years to get to a point where I was getting regular work in where I wanted to be, which was narrative. 10 years is a long time, but I remember thinking it's going to take me 10 years. So I organized my life as I was working to be able to structure my time every day, if I can, whether it was, obviously we all have to pay our bills. So I've worked at bars, I've worked at camera shops. During a summer when I was at a university, I got a job at a rental house. But what it did is it actually got me close to modern technology. And I worked in the back and I loaded trucks, but I was still making money, but I was still within the world of what I was interested in. So there's no real, the reality is, everyone says just be a cinematographer and just do it, which I agree with, but there's no shame in, like an actor becoming a bartender, so they can audition during the day and then bartend at night. There's no shame in that. Just call yourself a cinematographer. Also, don't be afraid of generating your own films. Write, direct, and now, especially today with modern technology, it's a lot more possible, where you can shoot on a camera like is shooting now, or a phone even, and you can go into a laptop and finish a feature film quality or short film quality film. So today it's a lot easier. And again, the words long game, I think, is what I would instill in anyone that would ask me that, which I know is not an answer people want to hear, but there is an element of luck to this. So you just have to have as much time to leave things happen, or the chance of things happening. So organize your life early on that you can do that. Not everyone's independently wealthy and can just sit around and generate their own things, but be real about it. And the idea of saying, how do I get it now? That's the question I get mostly. How do I do it now? Well, I'm sorry, that's not how it works. Not because you could get lucky and in 6 months just get this great independent feature that will spring you up, but that's the exciting part. It only takes one project to spring you forward. When I look at my career, when I started, I can track back, and this is the wonderful thing, is I have kind of, the history of my life to look back to. I can recognize and pinpoint certain projects that I had no idea were going to spring me forward in my career. I can look back now and say, oh my God, that got me so many more jobs because of this, this, and this. But at the time, I was unaware that it was going to lead to anything. So that's another thing I would say is never underestimate every project you're on. never underestimate people. That, because I always have this joke with people when I notice somebody on a production today that's like, whether they're a PA or a producer's assistant, you can see the ones that are going to be running studios. You could see it. They have an attitude. And I always would tell them, it's like, I'm going to be working for you one day. But it's very true. So be aware of your surroundings and try to also find others that are on that journey. Agents for cinematographers can be very helpful to you. For me, my journey with an agent was always around a project that basically, actually it was at the CSC Awards. I was a young cinematographer shooting, and I did this film called Soul Cages, which was a wonderful director, Philip Barker. He's a production designer as well. And he did these beautiful, very auteur, very art-based films that were like art installations, and I had done a couple of his films. So at the CSC Awards that year, I won a CSC Award for that film. And after that, actually that night, I had an agent that was in the room looking I guess he was looking for talent, approach me and say, I love that film, would you be interested in repping me? Now, I tell that story because I think the way that happened is very important. Agents ultimately are representing your work, and they ultimately work for you because they're, and it's important that they understand your trajectory. So the fact that my agent at the time approached me for that particular film was very important, as opposed to me knocking on doors. And that's the thing I would say, especially, agents basically need as much ammunition to sell you based on what you're doing, as opposed to that is the realism. If you walk up off the street and you don't really have anything that's in the social consciousness or has been recognized, I don't necessarily think that's the right time for you to get an agent. But people have this understanding that agents are going to make your career from zero. But unless you have something to give them to sell you, I think that's the point where it's okay to have an agent. But there's this conception that they're going to do it all for you. Even to this day, in my career, I have an agent in the US, and it's a fairly big agency. They are only as good as what I can give them to sell me with. So depending on the waves of things that I have, if I hadn't shot anything in 10 years, they couldn't do anything for me, because if you think about it, like, I have to give them something to sell, and sometimes it's about the project that you're working on. So I think that's the misconception. A lot of young DPs feel, oh, I'm going to get an agent, they'll get me work. It's possible that they would, but I don't think you should expect that. I think you need to be the ruler of your own career, and then at a certain point where you're able to provide them work that you're proud of to sell you on, I think that's the time, because then they're helping you make calls and negotiate contracts for you, and then it becomes more relevant. And that's my opinion. People might have different opinions on it, but I feel that it actually saves a lot of time, because a lot of frustration builds. I can see it. Well, I have an agent, and I'm with DPs that have gotten an agent, but they haven't really struck on something that, whether it's at a festival or everything, anywhere that way that has been recognized. And they go, I think I'm going to change agents now. I'd be like, well, you need to give them something. And it's hard, right? Because it's about your ego too. It's like you're combating your own ego of like, well, I haven't done it. Like, it's about being real about where you're at, I think, is half the battle in trying to advance in your career. Yeah, networking is an interesting thing today versus when I started. Because to me, the internet is an amazingly good tool to network. No, and it's interesting. I think we put too much stock in networking as cinematographers. I think, I'll tell you one thing. When I feel like I'm at an event and you can feel if somebody's networking with you right away. And to me, I don't think of it as a bad. I actually respect that they're doing it, but sometimes things happening organically feels better to the person that might give you an opportunity. And this is where the patience comes in. This is where, if there's a film, that's what's so great about the Toronto Film Festival. I had a film this year and I was there to promote that film with the team that did it. But some of the best interactions I had were other filmmakers that saw the film and that we were just naturally in the same room. That's an example of how do you put yourself in that situation without, hey, give me a job. It's more about talking about, when I'm in that room, talk about what's important to you and don't force it. It's just because at the end of the day, it's human beings interacting and they're either going to decide to work together creatively or not. And a lot of times in the jobs that I've gotten, I was told by the people hiring me, it was simply based on my personality and the work, but people won't hire you just for the work, or in my opinion. A lot of times they want to know they can spend like summer camp hours with you and it's 16 hours a day. So to me, the best networking is just being yourself, being in the right position to, like Toronto, the TIFF is a perfect example. I went to the Canadian Film Festival party there. It was amazing to see all the Canadian filmmakers there, but you could tell they were just all, I'm sure people were there forcibly networking, but some of them were just there to celebrate the community, So that's the advice I would give. Don't try too hard to network. That doesn't mean you don't go to events and just meet people. And to me, that's ultimately what people will want. They want to know who you are as a real person. Don't force it and just be yourself. That's why I think understanding the entire kind of organizational structure of our business is important as a DP. I don't expect much from my agent, and frankly, I'm getting better work out of them because they know if they need to they know the kind of projects I like, and they've given me early on, I set a precedent. They would keep sending me stuff that I'm like, I'm not feeling it, but that's hard to do when and again, maybe that's later in my career, but that relationship, that's why you can't force it, I think. And I just find in my experience, making it networking a more natural experience seems to have more impact. But again, be realistic about where you're at. As a young DP, that's what I would offer as an advice. Just be realistic. I was a dreamer and I still am, but that doesn't mean you can't be realistic. But I find sometimes people approach it from their dreams and it blinds them to the realism of where they're at. And I can detect that right away. And it's not to kill anyone's dreams, but it's to say, okay, you don't have access, what do you have to do? And do it in 1 year increments or even 1 week increments. And it sounds like a very self-help kind of thing, but it's very true. Because when you think about this ambition you have of ultimately, I want to shoot Blade Runner or films like that, the road from where people are at and they have the dream, it's a lot of, I think, and including myself, I had to learn that, is how do I get there but in bite-sized chunks? And I know these seem like very, and it's going to change for everyone. There's not one way to do this because of where you want to be, who you are, your personality as well. Some people are quiet. They're more, so be real about who you are and how you want to get there, as opposed to, there's a lot of things that I struggled with early in my career about, especially when I was working out of Canada, because I'm Canadian and I'm a proud Canadian. We have a certain cultural experience here. When I started working in the US, and there was this notion that I wasn't assertive enough on these sets. But to me, I had been lucky enough to work with auteurs where it was this trusting kind of thing. But I had a choice. I could have either changed who I was or I could have remained who I was. And the great Roger Deakins, I remember talking to him, said, stay who you are. It may take you a long time to get where you're going, but at least you've done it honorably for yourself. And that was the best piece of advice he gave me when I talked to him. And that's why I pass that along to people all the time. The advice I'd give to my younger self is me specifically is don't be so hard on yourself when it comes to if you're as a young DP and you're trying to navigate things, is to don't be so hard on yourself in the sense that you're learning and that you will make mistakes, but to make every mistake that you make mean something, as opposed to, you made a mistake, you screwed up. Okay, what did you learn from that? And that's something early in my career that I did personally. Not everyone's built the same way, but to make every lesson matter. Because think about it, that hopefully will reduce the level of frustration. If you have, and again, that's what I said earlier on, it's about attitude. This whole game is about your battle with yourself and your attitude of what you want to do. But it's hard enough. I see the frustration in a lot of young DPs that they want to get there right away. That, again, I'll say it, you have control over your attitude about that. And I think there is an opportunity, not a negative impact on making mistakes. That's why I say, I remember being in film school and all of us were scrambling to get our films made because, in university we had a chance, we had a team of people, we had film cameras, and there was this scramble. And now in retrospect, I realize, and I remember, this is the time to make the mistakes. No, there's no stakes here. Nobody's looking over your shoulder. Take chances at this time. And then everyone was saying, like, as if it was this feeling that they would never have a chance to make another film again. That's obviously not the right attitude. The attitude is, the way to have kind of spun that, my younger self was, hey, this is the time to experiment, and I'm about to have this bright future. It's going to take me 10 years. That's what I would have wished somebody would have said. It's going to take you 10 years. I discovered that myself. But it was literally a battle with myself of, am I quitting? Especially these bad experiences I talked about. That could have easily stopped my career, and I didn't let it. So it's basically the voices in your head. What are they? Are they negative or are they positive? And the only way to get forward, I think, is positive. You know what? That's why cinematographers are passionate people. They're people of the world, because it does take a long time sometimes. And frankly, I would argue it should take you a long time. Because if you're handed something a year after you got out of film school, by chance, every film is different. Every TV show, every documentary is different. In retrospect, I wouldn't want to have gotten that big job a year after I got out of film school. Many people would want to, but think about it. If I have the right attitude, like I know Steadicam operators, as an example, that were focus pullers, bought a rig, bought a Steadicam, and they don't upgrade for 5 years. And they'll say, I said, oh, you bought a Steadicam? Oh yeah, I'm not ready, I'm still practicing. Because they don't want to come out and then get a bad reputation for being somebody that's showing someone that they're steady, but they can't really do the job. So that's the equivalent to, you're a young DP. You have to be ready, I think, and you have to be real, because everyone's ambitious. They all want it now. I think you have to slow it down and enter things at the right time. That's hence the long game, because it's not just, hey, you got to be patient. Well, you also have to be capable of doing it, because you don't also want to get on a job that you can't really handle, and that ends up setting you back 5 years, because people say, well, he shot my film or she shot my film and it didn't really work out. You don't want that to happen either, so maybe frame it that way as well.